Hi there and welcome back to my channel, Solulu Rask. Yesterday I posted a video of how to sew a French seamed pocket bag, and specifically the one that I demonstrated with was this one here. If you recognise it, if you watched the other video, is specifically for the Forest and Thread Cinch Me I'm Dreaming dress, and I thought it would be nice after I created the pockets. Obviously I'm actually constructing this entire dress. I thought it would be quite nice to come back today and show you the process of actually inserting that pocket bag into the side seams of the dress. Now I've actually already constructed one side, so I can show you the finished effect of that. So the dress, if I can manage, I will pop a little picture of it just here so you can see the dress. So this is the right hand side as you would be wearing the dress, and if I can just find, there's the pocket actually in, and as I said yesterday, it's a nice enclosed seamed, so no finished raw edges, it's all nicely enclosed, and that's how it would be. If I flatten it out and show you how that looks on the side seam. I apologise that the fabric's black. When I started to do this, I had no intention of doing a little video tutorial. This was purely for my own personal wardrobe. But here you go. So if I get a close-up of that, you can see how that's all finished. It's got 2 lines of top stitching down the side, so when it's lying flat against the body, it's actually virtually impossible to see that there is indeed a pocket there. So it's actually really beautiful finish. So as I say, I've done that one, so what I'll do now is talk you through the process and the steps of doing the next one. So identify which of the pattern pieces is the front and back. For this pattern, the pocket bag gets fitted to the front section of the skirt first, and on this pattern it's very clearly defined. It's got 1 notch at the front, 2 notches at the back. Now on the side seam of this particular pattern as well, there's a little notch about 2 inches down from the top edge, and that's where we are fitting the pocket to. There isn't a second notch further down, you just match it up to that front one and it'll find its own space. So take the pocket bag, make sure it's the right way up, so almost like the curve of, I always think it's a bit like a spaniel ear, the curve of the pocket goes down the way, which makes sense because when you put your hands in your pockets it's going to go down. So find that notch on the front skirt section, and remember we're going to be going wrong side to wrong side. Now if you remember on yesterday's, if you haven't seen yesterday's video with the actual construction of the pocket bag itself, stop the video here, go back and watch that, and it will all become clear, because there's parts on that it's only going to be relevant if you've seen that first one. Now on yesterday's we folded 2 little sections of the pocket that weren't stitched, just over by 1/8 of an inch. Now they have to remain pressed down, and that little fold edge is going to line up with that notch. So just pop a little pin in there to hold that in place, and then just carry on pinning all the way down the rest of the pocket bag. So it's the opening of the pocket bag down the side seam of the skirt. And then just remembering to keep that section at the bottom end folded as well. Let's pick up when it's finished. It's going to look like that. So that's your pocket bag opening pinned to the front of the skirt. Now I know it might sound obvious to say this, but remembering it is just one side of the pocket bag that you're pinning to it, because if you don't, you won't be able to get your hands in your pocket. Once you've got that pinned in, it is just then a case of stitching the pocket bag to that side seam with a 1/4 of an inch seam. Now we're only stitching the side seam as far as the pocket bag, so where the pocket bag is fitted to the side seam, that is the only section that you're going to stitch, and it is just with a standard straight stitch. And always just do a little back stitch at the beginning and the end, particularly with pockets, because they do tend to get a little bit more wear, so you want to make sure that the ends are nice and sturdy and the stitching isn't going to come loose. And just trim off the edges. Now the next stage is to trim that section back by 1/8 of an inch. So if I hold this, actually if I hold it that way, it'll be a little bit easier. So this is the skirt, this is the pocket bag. This is the section that we've just stitched, which is the pocket bag opening. Between those stitch lines, what you're first going to do is from the edge down to the stitch line is just cut a notch all the way down to the stitch line, not through it, just to the stitch line, which will be a 1/4 of an inch because that's the seam depth. So basically you're just at the edge of the pocket bag, you're just trimming the seam down to meet the stitch line, which will become apparent later. And then, as we have done all the way through with the French seams, you're going to cut this section down by 1/2 again. Now, as I've been making this dress, as I said before, this is in cotton lawn, which has behaved itself beautifully. It presses beautifully and is very stable. I did think that I would prefer to make it in a viscose because of the drape of the fabric would be nice in this dress because there's a few gathers in it. I just thought it would look really nice. In hindsight, having now made it in the cotton lawn, I actually think this is the perfect choice for this dress to do the French seams because the finish that you're able to get is beautiful. So if I hold this open now, you'll see this is the pocket bag. This is where we've stitched it open. And what we're going to do now is just press this little section here, the one we've just stitched and trimmed back. We're going to press that seam allowance over towards the body of the skirt, nice and flat. And then we're going to flip the pocket bag over and press that section again along the seam line. So you will end up with something that looks like this. Okay, so press this section towards the skirt and flip it and press it down again. And I thought I'd just pop over to the ironing board and show you slightly better. So this is the front of the skirt and this is the right side. This is the pocket bag that we've just joined here on the side seam. So what we're going to do is press this section, the trimmed back section, in towards the skirt body. And you'll notice those two sections where we just notched it by a 1/4 of an inch will allow us to then take the pocket bag, flip that back over towards the skirt itself, and then we're just going to press that down because this section here is where we're going to stitch next, which will create the French seam on that pocket bag opening. And when it's pressed, it should end up like this. So you see you've got 1/4 of an inch down there, 1/4 of an inch there, and now we're just going to stitch the section in between. And we're back over at the sewing machine, and now I'm going to stitch in between these two sections. Now, what I'm going to explain here, because first time round I had to do a little bit of unpicking, so this is a good tip I'm going to give you now. Just hold that section and flip your hand underneath to the other side of the pocket bag and just gently open up that pocket bag opening, because when you come to stitch this section here, you want to make sure the other side of the pocket bag is out of the way. If you don't move that out of the way now and just stitch this seam, you're going to end up with the other side of the pocket bag in with the seam as well, and you're going to have a useless pocket, or you'll just have to unpick it all. So again, just a standard straight stitch. And again, I like to use my needle in the down position here, particularly on this step, because I tend to find that I keep stopping just to make sure that I have got that under pocket bag well out of the way. And this is going to be a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down to enclose the raw edges, which is basically what the French seam is. There's a double seam to enclose the raw edges. So I can just feel that pocket bag there, so move that out of the way. And again, just a little back stitch both ends. And as you go in, just keep smoothing the fabric and checking that that other pocket bag is out of the way and that you've got no kinks, ripples on that underneath pocket bag. As I say, first time round when I did the other pocket, I caught it in, so I had to unpick it. Again, another reason I'm glad this is cotton lawn, not viscose, because it would have frayed terribly, whereas this is behaving nicely. Okay, just trim the threads as we go. That's just my own personal preference. I know some people are very different, but that's my happy, is making sure that I trim them as I go along. Ain't no right, ain't no wrong. It's whatever brings you joy in your sewing, because that's what it's all about. And fingers crossed, hopefully if I turn this back, what we have is a completely enclosed, beautiful seam that we haven't caught the other pocket bag in. So at this point, we're going to go and press it again. And I know that's a step, again, very controversial, but I have to say with French seams, pressing at every step is absolutely essential to create that beautiful finish. So just head over to the ironing board and just press that seam down again. So back over the machine, just to show you that we've just pressed that section that we just stitched, and then just flip it back. Now, We're going to do exactly the same steps, but on this one we're fixing the final pocket bag opening to the back skirt. But just a tip here is when you've got it lined up to where it needs to be, so again we've got that notch at the top, you're going to open out the pocket bag, that little folded over section, match it up to the edge, pop a little pin in. I don't make it sound really obvious, but as this is the second pocket, just have a quick check of the rest of the skirt and make sure that it is flat and you haven't twisted it, because at this point, if this is your second pocket that you're fitting in, this is now going to be like sealing the skirt. This is turning the flat fabric into the skirt shape, because you're now going to be constructing the second side seam. So just make sure that you haven't twisted the front or the back before you start sewing. So just as we've done before, match the edge of that pocket bag opening to the side seam. And stitch down from that first notch. So basically, again, just the distance of the pocket bag with that 1/4 inch seam allowance, making sure to keep the second side of the pocket bag out of the way. It's easier on this one because the pocket bag will be on the top. Oh, pedal. Trim the threads. Don't you love working with black? It's quite cold in here and my glasses keep steaming up, so I've taken them off. So it's making it even harder for me to see the black. Okay, and then as we did before, just trim down to the seam line between the pocket bag, and trim that seam allowance down by half of its width. Oh, can't do it that way around, I have to do it that way. Always just making sure that you've got the rest of the skirt out of the way. And yet it does take a little bit of time to do French seams, but it's a really nice finish, and it's actually quite a therapeutic process. It slows down the whole process, so it's just all more considered, and it's actually quite relaxing. So as previously, we just need to go and press that seam towards the pocket bag, and then flip it over and press again, ready for the second seam. So again, once that's been pressed, that's the section of the pocket bag opening between the 2/4 inches that we cut down to the seam allowance, and we're just going to stitch along there again at 1/4 inch to enclose that pocket bag, that final pocket bag seam. And again, just always checking, because now this is the second pocket, or when you come to do the second pocket of the skirt, you've got all of the fabric for the skirt front and back and the pocket bag. Just have a little feel underneath to make sure is removing the pocket bag and the remainder of the skirt out of the way. It all gets a little bit fiddly at this point, but just take your time. No rush, and just make sure everything is just that French seam for the pocket bag opening that you're stitching. Little back stitch. Stopping at any point just to realign and just get everything out of the way. Oh, sorry for sniffing, it's quite cold in here. Okay, so what we're going to do now is just go and give it another press. I'm pressing, so when you lie it onto the ironing board, lie it out flat so your pocket bag is coming out to the side. I'll show you that a wee bit better. I was playing fabric Tetris, so on this pocket bag, although that looks like it's the right side of the fabric, it should actually be the wrong side, but I didn't have enough to do them in the other direction. So if I show you that side, it'll make more sense. So open up the pocket bag to the side, and you're going to press this seam again with that seam allowance towards the pocket bag. So pop away and do that. So that's that nicely pressed. Now we're going to finish closing up the side seam. Now for this, what we're going to do for this particular dress, because it has a channel with drawstring waists, is we're going to measure down 1/2 inch. I'm just going to do this with a pin, and then another 1/2 inch from that, or 1 inch in total from the top, which will bring you to just above where the pocket bag opening is. So I've just popped 2 little pins in there, and what this is going to be for is the channel that the drawstring is going to come through. So this is actually going to be left open. So we're going to just stitch from the top to the first marker point, lift the needle, just move the fabric up to the second, and down only to as far as the pocket bag opening, because obviously we're not going to be stitching the section here between the pocket bag, because that's got to stay open. And then at the other end, and it should all actually just come together quite nicely because you've notched the fabric at the side seam where we've done the French seam, it'll automatically just align at that little notch section, and then just pop a couple of pins in there just to keep it steady, and just go ahead and sew that closed. Now things are a little bit different on this side section, on this particular pattern, in that it's not going to be a French seam or true French seam here on the side panel. What we're going to do is a 1/2 inch seam, and then we're going to press the seams open and fold under the seam allowance towards the original stitch line, press it down and do 2 rows of top stitching, which then when you see it on the front of the skirt, top stitch is the opening of the pocket bag. But to start with, let's just stitch this side seam. And as I say, it's 1/2 inch seam allowance on this one. So up to that first marker point, Just lift the presser foot, bring the fabric down to the next marker point and only to as far as the pocket bag opening. Like that. And then down to below the pocket bag. There we go. And same again, 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way down to the hem of this one now. Oh, stuck together. I can't get it apart. Dear me. There we go. Right. So what we're going to do now is press the seam open here above the pocket bag and press the seam open underneath the pocket bag, and then once that's pressed open, we're just going to turn quarter of an inch under I should say, so the edge is folded back to meet the seam stitch line, and press it down so it's a nice finish there. So I've pressed the seam open or flat, and just, let's see if I can get it so I can see a bit better. So press the seam flat and then turned under the seam allowance again by 1/4 of an inch, and I've actually gone ahead and just popped in some pins just to keep that little bit flat down. So if I show it there, you can just, it's very patterned fabric, I appreciate that, and it's quite difficult to pick that out. You can just see the seam line there and where I've just pinned it down to keep it flat, because what we're going to do now is just top stitch down both sides of the seam, which is going to enclose those raw edges of the side seam. When you come to the pocket, the French seamed edge of the pocket, you're actually going to continue stitching that down to the front or the back of the skirt as it lays. I'm going to do that one. That one seems to want to lay, this one lays flatter, so I'll be able to show you that one clearly. So when you start, say this is the top, we're going to stitch down that little section, catch in the French seam edge of the pocket bag and carry on down the seam, and that's going to close it all. So just, I'm not going to video stitching this bit because it's getting, the video's getting a wee bit long, but basically just going to stitch those 2 lines of stitching, and I'll see you in a minute. So I'm just going to show you this bit. This is the top of the skirt. We've just stitched that first little section, and now this is the edge of the French seam of the pocket bag opening. So it's just lying flat against the skirt front. Just making sure it's all nice and flat, and it just naturally sits flat because it's been pressed in that direction. When you come to the end of the pocket bag, you're now going to start on the folded under seam allowance of the side seam. Okay, once you've done that, you can go and give it all a good press, and you want to be sure that when you're pressing it, you're pressing it, the pocket bag and the pocket opening, to the front of the skirt. And this is what it should look like when it's all stitched together. So you've got 2 lines of top stitching down the front, that's the side seam there, And that's a very discreet pocket bag opening. And then on the inside, all the seam has been enclosed with those 2 lines of top stitching. And that's it. Done.